Hello, Mark. You're up next.
Afternoon, Bart. How you doing?
How you doing, Mark? Where are you played out of?
Living the dream. Playing out of Las Vegas, the Wynn Encore.
The Wynn Encore in Las Vegas. And did they had somewhat recently changed their buy-in structure or something like that? Is that right?
Yeah, actually, when I said in the hand, I did make one minor error. I had said nine-handed. It was at the first of the year that they switched the 2-5 game down to eight-handed. So that's the most recent change. I actually called in last year and we talked about how they changed the 5-10 structure to the 5-10 big blind ante, no straddle.
Mm-hmm. Is it a 1,200 buy-in in this game or something?
1,500.
1,500. Okay, 1,500. Okay, eight-handed. How deep are you?
And we are 1,500 effective. That this isn't going to be a multi-way pot. Everybody in the pot has somewhere between 14 and 1,800 ish. The game had maybe been open for maybe an hour and a half or so.
Okay, so 1,400 to 1,800 stacks. Okay.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
So starts off under the gun, who is the deepest, who's probably got 1,900, opens up to 20. Middle position, who is probably a more passive recreational player, flats, hijack flats, cutoff flats, and it goes to me in the big blind, and I have 7 of hearts, 7 of spades.
And you call?
Yeah, and I complete there.
What is the minimum pair that you're going to squeeze there with so multi-way?
With the action, again, the under the gun player is competent winning, not a reg, but he's a thinking player. I've seen him play a bunch of hands already. I've played with him, I think earlier in the week or something like that. I'm probably looking at a 3-bet at 9s plus, king, queen suited, some occasional 6-7 suited, something along those lines.
So here's the thing that I would say is that it's interesting because depending on the stack sizes might depend on how I would comprise of a squeeze here, in the sense that, like, a lot of times when there's so much dead money out here, all of these other guys have somewhat collapsed ranges, unless you start to notice that some people are calling with some strong hands. And if you squeeze here out of the big blind, when you can call with a lot of the in-between hands, it puts a lot of pressure. It's almost like the tightest configuration for the under the gun to continue. Like, if I'm not saying to squeeze 7-7, but what I'm saying is that if you 3-bet here, you can easily make a case that under the gun is supposed to fold ace queen off here. With that being said, I still would almost favor squeezing suited broadways and the big ace-x types of holdings, as opposed to when you start to get down to like 6s and 7s here, just because of the fact of the barreling equity later on. That's why I think it depends on stack sizes and things like that. But you say 9-9, I think that's perfectly reasonable. You could make a case, though, that this could be somewhat of a profitable squeeze going down to maybe 8-8 or 7-7. But okay, so we go 5 ways to the flop at $100, right?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And the flop comes out ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds.
Ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. It's funny. I don't know if he's joking. Dylan, the previous caller, said deuce, deuce plus for sure. The thing about having, if you ever do start to squeeze, well, deuce, deuce would be nice on this board, right? If you're going to squeeze any pair, what you have to understand is you have to start running 3 straight bluffs with the low pairs that you don't flop sets with, like deuces through 4s and 5s and things like that. There's a lot of people don't have that in their arsenal. Anyways, it's ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds. You have 7 of hearts, 7 of spades. Okay.
Yeah, and just, for perspective, of course we are going to have a call here, but I had pretty much given up on the hand at that point in terms of with it being so multi-way. And then even thinking about, I looked at it, I really only have one semi-clean out in terms of hitting anything. That's
you can't call any bet from any player.
Oh, of course. No, that's no question. I'm not no consideration of calling a bet.
Yeah.
But of course I check, and action does end up checking around.
All right, so it gets checked around. So it remains 100. So MP under the gun does not bet. And just because you said under the gun might be a thinking player, there's a lot. I even read on Reddit. I read a thread on Reddit Reddit is, by the way, my new 2+. I haven't been on 2+2. People, hopefully somebody will cut this, put it on Reddit. But Reddit is, I enjoy it. Reddit poker/poker. I used to enjoy 2+2. I haven't been on 2+2 in, it seems like, months, approaching a year. It's pure garbage. But I enjoy some of the Reddit threads. I mean, it's not heavily strategy, but what I was going to say is I even read on Reddit, a guy had written a guide to beating the low stakes. And, he had some stuff in there that was good. But one of the things that he said, which I vehemently disagree with, is checking range OOP multi-way from up front. Checking range. Now, you can check sometimes, but I think it leaves a lot of value on the table. The only reason why I bring that up is just because under the gun doesn't bet here, it does not mean he doesn't have an ace this multi-way. That's all.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree with that. And we get the 7 of clubs on the turn.
So 7 of clubs. How did I know that was coming, or we wouldn't have a call, right? So you get the free card, and now you turn a set. And now the question is, how should we play it? So we know that just because under the gun checked doesn't necessarily mean that he doesn't have an ace in this particular spot. So there's front door diamonds out there, and now there's backdoor clubs. What I will say though is that more likely than not, when MP hijack and cutoff check, I suppose somebody could have like a weak ace here, but if everybody's playing straightforward and betting their hands, the fact that they've checked after the preflop raiser usually leans them towards not really having an ace. So when everyone really hasn't bet, and this is why it's important for positional sort of awareness, because they've checked to the left of the under the gun guy, and it doesn't appear like their hands are strong. Either they don't have an ace or it's like a weak ace. I tend to just come out and bet here when people sort of have announced that they're not all that strong, because if you go for a tricky check raise, they might not bet and call, or it might just get sort of checked through a lot. Whereas if this guy who's the preflop raiser had sort of like ISO'd, like limpers, and then people checked to him naturally on the flop, you wouldn't know that those guys from up front didn't have an ace, because they were checking to the guy, checking to the raiser. But here, the raiser acted first. These guys checked after him. So there's a case for just leading out here, because you're just going to get called. Like it's not a whole lot of strong hands that are going on. With that being said, though, we already said that the under the gun guy, he could just be checking a lot of hands here. It is a double flush draw board. So if you did want to go for a check raise here, people very well might convince themselves that you might be making a play with a combo draw, as opposed to a board that was like ace 9 deuce 7 rainbow, where they might find less. So I could see going either way with it. I could see coming out and betting. I could also see at this stacked up going for a check raise.
Yeah, and that was the really the part that I was considering is, if I go for a lead right now with the action behind the under the gun raiser, the 3 field callers, I can see a lot more flush draw. Someone hit the backdoor flush draw, possibly even a combo draw. It would be Jack 10 in that case. That just picked up additional equity. So I was looking at that versus if I go for a check raise, how many people, like you just said, how many people are going to hold on at that point? Because that's either way, I think it looks fairly strong with either of those actions.
I mean, the case for going lead is you get 2 calls as opposed, you might get, and another thing too about the draw heavy boards is you might get two streets of somebody calling you with a bluff catching hand. Whereas if you check, it might get checked through again, or once you start to check raise, now all of a sudden you actually might make more money by just going lead. But again, the more I think about this, the more I do like a lead though, because the 3 people behind the preflop raiser checked. And again, if the preflop raiser was in position and everyone had naturally checked to him, then you could probably go for a check raise more often. Did you bet here?
No, I opted for the check.
Okay.
And Under the gun now checks again.
I mean, that would tend to imagine now that, I mean, if under the gun is quote unquote checking range here, I think at some point he's got to bet, right? Some of his good aces off here. You would think, right? I mean, he's just going to chuck his life away with like ace, king, ace, queen. I mean, the 7 doesn't really connect with anything with the exception of like somebody having ace 7 suited that was checked, or like 9-7. Like it puts another draw out there, right? So, okay, under the gun checks. Yeah.
And at this point, middle position, that's 35.
All right, so 35. Mm-hmm.
Third pot.
Yeah.
Hijack calls. And now the cutoff calls.
Oh, wow. So hijack calls, cutoff calls. So MP bets 35, hijack calls, cutoff calls. I mean, the pot's 200. I mean, at this point, you have to raise now, right? By the way, too, I mean, this was the other thing, too, where I sometimes talk about these situations where I will, in a little bit of an unbalanced way, depending on what I want to accomplish, will lead with my strong value hands like your hand. And then if I had a hand like, say, like 8-6 of diamonds, 8-10 of clubs, I'll go for a check raise to add like max fold equity too, or have it get checked through, which is not the worst thing in the world with my draws, right? But here, I think you have to raise. Send in the nukes. Are you asking me what my sizing should be?
Yeah, what would you do in terms of the sizing on a check raise if you're taking this line?
Well, I remember there's still a bunch of draws out there too. I mean, the pot is 200, so if you wanted to make a pot size raise, it would be something like 270, right? 35, 200. Yeah, it would probably be like 270, 275. I might make it like 200 to 225, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe larger.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on how nitty. I mean, is the game real nitty?
No, that's what like I mentioned before. Basically, the under the gun player, as I mentioned, was a solid thinking player winning. The two middle position, and hijack were much more recreational, a little bit looser. And then the cutoff was a fairly passive, but I would say decent reg.
Okay. So what did you raise to? I hope you raised.
Of course.
Yep.
Yeah, 210.
So hero raises to 210. Mark, I'm pretty sure this didn't happen, but this would be insane if all of a sudden the under the gun guy 3-bet you.
It's funny you mentioned that. I thought if there is any way that he has pocket aces here,
yeah,
that may be this might be the time that I
mean, that would be crazy if the under the gun guy 3-bet you. I mean, you wouldn't think that the under the gun guy would just, I mean, if the under the gun guy call, again, it's kind of strange for him to check 2 straights. I assume under the gun folded.
He did fold.
All right, so UTG folds. Mark goes to 210. Okay.
Middle position now folds.
Okay.
The hijack folds.
Okay.
And the cutoff goes into the tank maybe 20 to 30 seconds and puts in the call.
All right, so the cutoff calls. I mean, he was the third caller. So he was the guy on the flop that checked in position. And then on the turn, it went bet, call, or excuse me, MP bet 35, hijack call, cutoff called. Now hero raises to check raise to 210, UTG folds, MP folds, hijack folds, cutoff calls, closing the action. So you guys have put in 420 plus 70, 490. It's probably just under 600. I think it's 590 in the pot, right?
Yes, exactly.
All right. I mean, you would think that this guy's got to draw here a lot.
Yeah, and that's really what I'm thinking about. As you just mentioned, the fact that he was closing the action on the flop after it got checked to him, I am pretty much ruling out most 2 pairs in this case. Like if he has ace 9,
no,
ace 2.
I think he's leaned towards the draw. The question becomes like, which draw is it?
Yeah, exactly.
And, you can't always say, well, he would bet a flush draw here. Not necessarily 5 ways, just because UTG, especially if UTG is checking like almost all of his hands on the flop. If I was up against a guy like that and I was in the cutoff, somehow V-pipped an overcall, like I probably wouldn't be betting many like non-combo diamond types of holdings here. So he can still have a diamond draw. Now, there aren't. So what else is out there for draws? Obviously, backdoor clubs. And a sneaky hand here too, Mark, that this guy could have that I might end up having here is like if I had 10-8 suited here, and I'm not talking about even having the flush draw side. I'm talking about like having like some sort of open, I mean, because I'm probably not going to be playing 8-6, 10-8, and then you represent the flush when it comes in. Although you have announced that your hand is pretty strong, so usually you're not in the business in live poker of like trying to move people off of sets. Like if the river comes, like on a backdoor club. But I got to tell you, like if I had 10-8 of spades here and I called and you check raised and then I called and a club came, I would be bluffing it for sure. And then sometimes the thing about going for straight draws on flushing boards is that you'll get paid when you hit your hand and then you can bluff the flush. But anyways, the pot's 590. It's ace of diamonds, 9 of clubs, deuce of diamonds, 7 of clubs. Okay.
And the river hits the king of hearts.
Oh, just a total brick, huh?
Absolute brick.
Oh my God. This is a weird spot for you. It's a weird because it's like, it feels like it's just so apparent that his hand is a draw that you might even make like, I mean, there are your hand's so strong though, like it's just almost impossible for you not to have the best hand, but there are situations where, and it's usually not because I usually don't like checking to induce a bluff, but there are situations where if your opponent's range is entirely draws, usually the play is going to be to check. I have another idea for you though here, as opposed to checking. I just think that once you check raise, and then at the end you check, I don't know how many guys are going balls to the wall with a busted out draw because it just looks like you're check calling so much. But I have an alternative line here. And I've talked about this on the show sometimes too. Could you ever make a stupidly small bet here? Like almost to try to induce, like a stupid bet, like 60 or 70. And somehow you might actually also get hero called by like the king high flush draw that missed, that ran into a king. King X of clubs, king X of diamonds. Or if he had like some other pair with a flush draw, like 7X of diamonds or something like that. The reason why I'm saying stupid, so again, you could check and you could induce a bluff here, try to induce a bluff, or I might, that doesn't seem to like play out all that well in a lot of cases. I might make a stupid bet and try to induce something. I can't see really betting anything that approaches being, God, maybe even over like 30 or 40% of the pot here. It just doesn't make any sense.
Would you consider going over pot and targeting?
Well, if I didn't think that I was going to bet over 30%, I would not go over pot now. Do you understand why I don't like that though?
Oh, I agree. And
like what are you targeting if you go over pot here?
I would specifically ace X of clubs that, with all of the draws bricking out.
Ace X of clubs. Okay. Ace X of clubs. So you'd have to check back the flop on it with ace and then have the nut flush draw on the turn. This is why I kind of like, actually, I don't know why I washed over ace X of clubs. I think that this is probably then more, it's probably, I was thinking just king X was possible. Then I would probably bet 1/4 the size of the pot here. I think 25 to 30% of the pot would do it. It takes out a possibility of him. It takes out the possibility of him trying to bluff. But I suppose if ace X of clubs is there, like when I wasn't sort of paying attention to ace X of clubs, I was thinking it was going to be a check. But again, like at these stakes, like these spots just don't get, you've announced your hand's getting bluffed like a lot. So that's why I'm not like the huge fan of the check. What did you end up doing here?
I ended up betting 2/3 pot roughly. I went 405.
405. So I don't know. Trying to get called by ace X of clubs only.
That's primarily what I'm targeting there. Just like I said, because he's not going to have any sets here. He's never going to have two pair. So I think someone in the chat mentioned ace king. He's 3-betting ace king pre-flop. So and again, he can't have ace 7 suited outside of, if you can't have ace, I don't think he can have ace suited at all, ace 7 suited at all. So he couldn't have turned two pair.
See, people are saying that they want to bet large because they want you to mark to look like you busted out on a draw. Now that has some credence, but I think what I've been thinking about the whole time though is that this guy is really leaned towards a draw. That has been the overwhelming thing for me. Some people are looking at if people are looking at it like, oh, well, he's got ace X here and he's going to hero call. Okay, but it just seems to me like this guy's got a draw here so much, and that would lean. I guess that makes sense. That you could make a case then that it could be, which is what some people in the chat originally had said, a check to induce or a very large bet. So I kind of take that back. Again, I don't know how I missed the ace X of clubs, but you could say, I want to make a large bet to make it look like I've got a draw here that may get called by ace X of clubs, or I want to check. So you went 405.
And I was thinking if I had something like Jack 10 of clubs, 8 6 of clubs, something along those lines, right. I might make a bet like this where it's, roughly a third of my remaining stack where, if I put in half my stack, he might think that I'm going to call it off no matter what, if I'm putting that much at risk. So that's kind of why I went on that sizing.
What did he end up doing?
He tanked for about 2 to 3 minutes and folded.
2 to 3 minutes is a long time. He really tanked for 2 to 3 minutes? What is he tanking with here? I don't. Does a guy call a check raise with ace X after checking back the flop and then tank for 2 and 3 minutes on a brick when you go 405? I mean, I suppose it's possible. I guess it's the definition of Fifth Street chicken. The thing about this is that if I'm your opponent here, in this scenario, I don't know if I would fold the river if I called your check raise in this scenario. And I do talk about how you can absolutely fold to river aggression when nothing changes because the bet in itself is change enough. But I don't know in this situation though, because I think I might just fold out on the turn if I think that you're always value heavy. Because I would think that you're going to follow through anyways if you've got nothing. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a little strange to me. So he folds. You never got a reveal?
Didn't get a reveal. And I mentioned this in the email. I agree, the awkward position to be in on the river just because he's going to have so few value hands that are better than just a single ace. Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, in hindsight, was the better play really just a lead turn, hope that with that many people in the field and that draw heavy of a board, somebody was going to make a play and get more money that way.
Yeah, it's weird because I just thought that there's so many different possibilities for this hand. It's an interesting one. It's one of the best non-revealed hands I think that we've had in a long time. Thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Because the reveal doesn't really matter, right? Whether he called or not. Now some people are saying bet smaller. We don't want to be results oriented.